Hi, everyone, and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader, and I'll be your host today as we talk about best practices for a multi-cloud migration. We've got a couple of guys who are on the road today that are going to be talking with us about this topic. We please welcome Kent Christensen, our multi-cloud practice director, coming to us live from an airport somewhere in the United States. And we've got Carm Taglienti, who's a distinguished engineer, coming to us from an AWS conference. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks. Good to be here. Happy holidays, everyone.
So I'd like to kick it off. We've been doing surveys and I've been a slacker in getting those surveys kind of covered at the end, but I want to kick off with the survey. And thanks to all of you who responded, actually the most respondents we've had so far. And by the way, this is our last episode, if you will, of the year. So we're really stoked. We're going to go out with a bang. You guys are going to have to do something really impressive to make this thing close really well. So just leaving that hanging out there. The question was, does your organization use a single cloud provider, multiple cloud providers, or a hybrid cloud approach? We had 14% say single cloud, 38% say multi-cloud, 34% hybrid cloud, and 14% say I don't know. Based on that, any comments first of all? I guess it's fair to ask to you guys.
Well, I guess the way that I always approach it, at least to start, is always making sure we define what multi-cloud really means to people. So I think in the grand scheme of things, and I know you guys that have listened to me before are like, why you keep harping on this multi-cloud thing, but it's true. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we think about, are we using multiple clouds or are we using integrated clouds? And I think eventually, we'll probably talk about that later today, but I think in some ways, I really would love to know, especially for the respondents, when they say multiple clouds, are they talking?
Did he freeze or did we? There you go.
No, it was probably me. I'm sorry. It's kind of spotty here at the conference. I'm really sorry. Anyways, I was just sort of hitting on that part of it, but yeah, that was my observation, at least initially.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. We've been talking about cloud for a long time, and the answer is multi-cloud. Thus, the subject or the title of this. But I think there's, some organizations started themselves in the cloud native, they're called, and so they might be a single cloud because they built their organization in a cloud. A lot of enterprise organizations did this rush to cloud. We sometimes say, can you justify your cloud strategy? But there was a lot of people just moving to the cloud in big contracts. And we are seeing a balancing of some of that is like, wait a minute, some of these things shouldn't be in the public cloud. Some of these things should be in a different type of hybrid cloud or cloud-like on your data center. So at the end of the day, we are definitely seeing multi-cloud become something that people are getting their arms around and start to adopt.
Thank you. So, and that's kind of the point that I was getting to before I said, all right, you guys comment, is I think we probably should do a definition of what we mean when we say multi-cloud. So Carm, why don't you take that?
Yeah, so, and I was alluding to earlier and Kent was reinforcing, it is basically, when we think about the cloud, we think about, it is infrastructure in the grand scheme of things, but there's also public services that are made available to us. And so if we think about it in that context, then in some ways, we may want to take advantage of the services that are available to us as we think about our next generation applications. So in that case, then interoperability in the cloud or clouds, including hybrid, becomes what I like to call federated clouds. And there's an industry sort of coalescence around that definition. So multi-cloud not only means working in the cloud and the multiple clouds, but it also can mean, how do I take advantage of the best cost profiles in a cloud provider? How do I take advantage of services that I might want to use within one cloud versus another without naming any names? But in the grand scheme of things, I think people are looking at this now from a competitive advantage perspective, from a cost efficiency perspective, but also from a portability perspective. And I'll get to Kubernetes and that discussion in just a little while, but in the grand scheme of things, because then the big question becomes, how do we do it? And I think as we think about containerization and services, that's how we can actually start to achieve this sort of federated concept that I'm describing. But it's we are seeing an evolution toward that kind of a model.
All right, Ken, anything to add for that?
Yeah, I think cloud is a nebulous thing. It is really a lot of stuff. And so, first of all, almost everybody is doing cloud by accident by using some sort of a SaaS application, right? So you didn't run Salesforce and ADP and all kinds of things in your data center anymore because they were provided via a cloud link, and the person providing the cloud service. So there's your first cloud, and we call that, if you're going into the cloud, is there an app for that? Do I need to run this because it's something that everybody uses and it's not super strategic? Now, Karim started talking about multi-cloud, implying that there's this concept that a single thing can use multiple clouds. I think that is incredibly rare. What we see most often is, in a multi-cloud world, to say there are certain things that absolutely belong in the cloud. The things that are growing fast, and a lot of the stuff that Karim's going to talk about, hey, these things are exploding. We really don't know how big they're going to be. Could be a startup within your organization, AI, something like that, but you can't buy and procure infrastructure for that. But what most commonly we do is we look at somebody that, let's say they have 500 or 5,000 applications, and we say, hey, these ones actually make sense in the cloud. These ones don't. The concept of lift and shift, people are realizing that lifting, for example, a regular VM and putting it in the cloud may be really, really expensive and not give you any benefits and might actually be harder to run. So multi-cloud is, in an organization, might have some stuff in the data center if they still have a data center, hosted, maybe connected to cloud, SaaS apps, and things that are kind of more cloud native and made for cloud. So all of that makes up multi-cloud in my world.
All right. And I think, again, from a maturity perspective, there's all those different parts of the spectrum that I think people are trying to work through. And I think that's why it's probably really good for folks to understand the nuances of that, either from leadership understanding, because, sometimes if we say, I would kind of joke on the survey that just about everybody could be considered hybrid cloud to some form or fashion. But I think we've got to make sure that those distinctions are clear when leadership hears a term, and to make sure that they know what they're talking about. And I guess it's more about that business outcome that we're trying to drive to, as opposed to the actual technology or public or private cloud that's being used. Let's probably start with that solution and back ourselves into, what are we doing now? What do we want to do? What are the compelling reasons to do those things? And then from an economy perspective, where's the best way to do it from a financial perspective? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Jason, because I think it really starts with the business outcome or expectations. And technology is technology, right? Whether we're running in the cloud or running on premises, or we're using Kubernetes or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like we need to really just sort of think about innovation from that perspective. Like I said, if it's not achieving a business outcome, then we're not going to do it anyways. So it's really just something where what is available to us, what is mature enough to be able to, create an ROI, or even understand the TCO of how we do this, or how much the cost of ownership that is in the grand scheme. And then do we have the resources to support it in the managed services? And those are exactly the things we talk about when we engage with customers around migration, or call it modernization of their environment. So we kind of include them together, because it really is this business-focused discussion around the application of technology within, in the cloud is the popular term, as Kent was talking about, but it's really, it is infrastructure, it's technology, it's responsibility for particular types of services and who owns that. And that all factors into that business problem that you're talking about. And, that I think is where a lot of customers really need to sit back and think about, how is it that we're going to leverage these capabilities to realize business outcome for us. So really good point.
Oh, thanks. And I appreciate everybody working through the logistical aspects of where you're currently at. So how do we approach something like this? I guess from, and maybe we get both of your perspectives, because it seems like you're kind of the solution, or the way we approach the solution may be different depending on kind of the way that we interact with our clients, or in general, the folks that we're trying to help out in this situation. So how would you engage? Kent, why don't we start with you? How would you engage with somebody who's trying to try to leverage multi-cloud? What's the way that you typically engage with those folks?
Well, I think the reality is, and we of course deal with a lot of enterprise organizations.
Sure.
And it makes no sense for us to go in and tell them what cloud is because they've already got people in their organization that have a strategy.
Sure.
And it's somewhere down the road, but very rarely is it in a final state, right? It could be I've got a concept, we've invested many millions of dollars in the concept, we may have committed, but we don't know quite how to get there. And so really when we go to an organization, we start with where are you at? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? It might say, I think we've always said, I'm going to move 80% of my workloads to the cloud by such and such a date. And like, why 80? We had to pick a goal. It's like, how would you like to pick the right 80, or maybe it's 56 or and so we really start with where are you at today? We assume we've got a strategy. We think we can help you and give you data and information, as Cam pointed out. This application worked better if you tweaked it. This application might not make sense. We've got a lot of experiences with a lot of organizations, and all we're doing is saying, we think some of the advice we give you as you go through this journey can help you make decisions, but they ultimately are your decisions. It's your strategy. We're just here to help with that because we've done this a lot. Does that make sense?
Certainly. And Carmen, it seems like when you're talking to folks, it might be, again, from a maturity perspective, folks that have probably hit a certain place in their cloud journey where now they're looking for bigger, better, faster, more capabilities wise, or data aspects or a processing capability that they want to leverage a public cloud for. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just to amplify a little bit what Kent was starting with as well, is we have very specific approaches for how do we look at your data estate? How do we look at your application estate to understand where you are in that maturity model that you're talking about, Jason, as well. And so it's, and not everybody's ready to just go to, oh yeah, we're going to do full containerization and here we go. So there's still a lot of organizations are just IaaS is perfectly fine. Infrastructure moving in the cloud, let somebody else manage it, saving lots of money related to operational expenditure. But as you said, there's a lot more opportunity as the cloud continues to grow in popularity, but also in terms of service, the richness of the services that are being provided, especially integrated services. So now we end up looking at it from the perspective of how can you do more with less within the organization? And then how do you sort of really sort of minimize the technical debt and push that technical debt to the cloud providers? So if you're letting them manage for you a lot of the complexity of the data center or the infrastructure, or letting them provide scalable services so you don't have to worry about how do I scale my applications. Those are things that are really beneficial. And of course, data, as you alluded to, data is a big one because data gravity is a big issue for a lot of organizations. How do I put all my data someplace where I can actually access it? And there's lots of scalable capabilities, or I'll call them elastic, because it's not just, we don't just want to scale up. We want to only scale up when we need it. And when we don't need it, we want to scale it back down. And the cloud actually provides a rich environment for us to be able to do that, to be able to access our data, do data science, do AI, ML, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that these innovations are actually helping us to create sort of this sympathetic or collaborative rhythm within our organizations where we can take advantage of what the cloud providers are investing in, and it allows us to be able to move forward very quickly.
Nice. And so let me take an approach that's, I'm not trying to call you out or put anybody on the spot, but from a business perspective, as a CISO in a Fortune 500 organization, I hear folks who come and talk about things like you just described. And then my reality is somewhere along the lines of kind of the way that Kent's talking. And what are the things that have to happen within an organization to get, it's more than me just using infrastructure as a service. Now I'm rolling into some really cool federated model with my workloads. It seems like there's some tertiary steps that we kind of need to call out here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So you wanted to end with a bang, right? So you're going to call me out on this one? No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's you're right. I mean, it's people process technology, right? At the end of the day, and technology is super cool, and the maturity of it is probably one of the biggest things that we have to think about. But like you said, there's a lot of things that we didn't. When I talk about cool application of technology, I'm not really talking about, well, who's managing it from the perspective of the organization.
Right.
What happens if something goes wrong? Where the security aspects of it, of course, are in the middle of it all. So we need to make sure that we do understand all that. And is the organization mature enough? And I'll even go one step further. Is the organization, can they handle the innovative transformation? Because disruption of the organization, to your business point earlier, is another big component of this. Sometimes technology can break the back of an organization. So, again, we do help customers understand this is the potential impact. So, your point's really well taken. It's like, how do we help you understand what the impact could be and what's the level of maturity, so we can help you see 2 to 5 years from now, so that we're not getting you involved in something where it's like, yeah, you know what, you're gonna have to redo all of this in 5 years. So I think that's where we could help to bring some more insight, no pun intended, into the future, so that we can say, hey, these are mature technologies, and we can help you along that path of maturity.
No, and thanks for that. And again, you answered exactly how I expected you to, but it was just one of those things that, I think about a lot, because it seems like, back to kind of the perspective, kind of referring to Kent, but it's not necessarily him. But when we're dealing with folks in that particular situation, we're dealing with a certain portion of the organization that's kind of fulfilling their particular obligation back to the organization, whether it be infrastructure or something along those lines. It seems like, to do something that you're talking about, Carm, it's this more, it's got to have everybody involved, because this way that we're going to have to change fundamentally the way that we develop, the way that we operationalize, and do a lot of things, and maybe change the way we secure the data that we're collecting or creating with this application. So it's just one of those things where I think that, to your point, that tech isn't going to automatically run itself, and it could potentially destroy the organization. But I think what makes me feel comfortable is we've got all the engineers from all the disciplines available to us to be able to figure out that from start to finish, including organizational change management and those types of things.
There's a lot of gems in what was just said by Carmen. You opened it up and you said you wanted to end with a bang. Some of us, we think about these complex things, and it's a big transformation for a customer to go from, Carmen, you pointed out, I think a lot of organizations look at their data center and say, that's a cost center. It's not revenue generating. When in reality it is. Everybody needs this. What's the best way to do that? So the concept of technical debt is the biggest deterrent to what they're trying to really accomplish organizationally, which is old stuff in the data center. And it's got a really bad name for a good reason. Now, the biggest challenge to doing cloud right is probably political. You have a lot of fiefdoms. Like, I was the guy who ran the data center and I'm fighting this. But yourself, is wearing the suit, and the CISO can throw a flag at any time that says this data will not go to cloud, or this data has all these requirements. And that's just one of many parts of the organization that can distract you from actually doing what is most efficient for the organization. So it is our job to help people that are trying to get their things done, maybe in sections, and say, how about we do this? There are nuggets we can all hold on to that have been kind of truth since the beginning of this. I don't think any analyst ever said lifting and shifting a workload that is running in a stable state and running your company and putting it in cloud is a good idea unless you have another reason to do it. Like, I'm going to put it in cloud, and that's not easy, but the benefit will be I can take away my data center, and hopefully those, so that's saving money. And then the other side of it is making money. But I definitely, you really have to go to the organization, figure out where they are, figure out where the politics are, figure out who's trying to get things done, and help them the best we can.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, our message typically to our clients that we're talking to is, are we including everybody that needs to be included in this. I think that's one of those things that sometimes, again, I'm the client in a lot of situations as well, where folks are coming to me. I'm luckily in the culture of our organization is on the forefront of this, I think, is including all of those right people to get it right. But that took years of a cultural change within our own organization to make those things happen.
It's interesting. Everybody's at different places, right?
Yeah.
So some organizations got really aggressive, and they might have lifted and shifted some things. So I pick on a VM because a VM is something that almost everybody's running. A VM is not native to any public cloud, but they're picking up a VM in the VM, putting it in the public cloud. And so some of them have already done it. And they realize, wow, that's not what I expected. And they're trying to figure out. And so we got lots of projects coming back. Some of them are thinking about it. Hey, if I got to move 80%, that's going to include a lot of VMs, et cetera. And so we really got to get them where they're at and figure out, is there something we can do? Now, what the big breakthrough is 5 years ago, if we said, you don't need to do this in public cloud, you can buy a bunch of stuff. Well, that doesn't compare. Now, with the concept of consuming a service, we literally can say, hey, we can put your cloud wherever you want. We can put it in the public cloud. We can put it in cloud connected, which I think Carmen was alluded to. We can put it in your data center if you still have it. And we know it's X cents an hour to run this. How does that compare? Now we've got real data to make informed decisions. And that's what I think we're saying is, let's give you information about what you're trying to do related to your environment that helps you make the right decision for your organization.
And I would just add, and Ken, you just hit on this, and it made me think of, the approach. So if we think about, and service orientation has been around for a long time, back client server, services, et cetera. But now we're, moving into microservices and functional services, or even database services. But I think that's the key. We separate what needs to be done from where it runs. And we say cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be, holistic cloud. It's basically, if the organization is thinking about the services that they want to create to drive their business, that's really the focus area that we want to, have them undertake with us on that journey. So if you're thinking about service orientation and manageability and securitization and scalability across your services, then that makes a lot of sense. And then we pick the cloud later, or where we're going to run it later, because we do a lot of work in IoT too, in the intelligent edge. So guess what? It may actually run on your device, or it may run in some remote location. But the key is that I need to understand, like, what am I trying to accomplish with my functional services? Like I said, data or whatever. And then I can pick where it goes. But I think far too often customers, or even, probably we do it ourselves. It's like we just say, oh, we're focusing on the cloud and that's it. It's like, that's not everything. It's not a be all end all. It's really just, again, I don't want to belittle the capabilities they provide, but it is an infrastructure. And if they do have services, PaaS services, for example, that we can take advantage of, like a database service, then yeah, let's take advantage of that if it makes sense for us. But it's like all that, we're coming back to the business imperatives, to the cost profiles, to the what am I really doing in terms of either eliminating or minimizing technical debt? Because guess what? I'm going to have to do this all over again. So everyone that actually moved, lift and shift, as Kent was talking about, that moved into the cloud, like I've got customers coming back and saying, yeah, we did all that already, and we still haven't really done anything other than get rid of some of our support staff. And so it's like, okay, so now we need to talk about phase 2. And that's where we're getting into this modernization concept, which is, again, I don't have all the answers, but we certainly have a lot of perspectives to be able to move or help customers understand how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main point of this conversation. There are a lot of options. And, you even went into the IoT aspects, and maybe the processing or the data resides somewhere out there as opposed to in a public cloud or something along those lines. I think that's one of the kind of the value props, right? Is to get people who know the latest technology or what's on the roadmap from the technology providers, regardless of whether they're infrastructure or otherwise. And then to be able to craft, based on where they are and where they want to be, a solution to deal with the journey as well as the destination. that's, I think, in a nutshell, kind of what the team we would pull together for, a solution that, depending on what it was. And I think that's what's cool about what we do. You mentioned something that I felt we should probably define a little bit, or, go into depth when you were talking about folks that had already kind of made the journey. And Ken had alluded to this as well. Folks that had made the journey and did that kind of lift and shift. They're probably looking at the economics of everything. Tell us a little bit about FinOps when we're talking about that. What do we mean when we say that?
Yeah. So, and I'm sure Ken will have a definition as well. But when I think about it, many of our customers, and as a matter of fact, I just had several out here at the conference that I'm at, talking with customers about, well, how do we manage our operational costs within the cloud? Or we have over provisioning or underutilization, depending on how you want to talk about it. And they're not even sure workload distribution. So FinOps really just focuses on the financial operations of the infrastructure. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be cloud, but we typically apply it to the cloud. So it's like, how many IaaS servers am I running? Do I have the right size servers to be able to handle my workloads? What's the capacity that's required? How do I monitor it? And then what's my cost profile? So do I go with reserved instances? Do I go with, maybe on-demand instances, et cetera? So all of that analysis to be able to understand, like, what's the best cost profile for me to use those services that are available in the cloud to meet my usage characteristics. And we have the data for it. So it's a very nuanced kind of analysis. And so, a lot of people will get their bill and be like, and say, okay, you use this much consumption, but you really don't understand what's happening behind the scenes in terms of elasticity and consumption. And that's where FinOps comes into play. So it really digs deep, double clicks into this a little bit to understand, maybe the trend over years, the trend over months, the trend over hotspots in your business. And then FinOps really just is a discipline that focuses on helping you to optimize that. And I had a customer, actually, it was interesting because just yesterday at the AWS conference, they announced some new instance types. And they're like, oh my God, I could save so much money now because I can use these new instance types because they better align with what I need. And that's really kind of a FinOps discussion in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, and then why aren't we telling them to use these new instances? And it's like, well, we are, but we just have to make sure that we, understand for your behavior before we can make those recommendations. So, but it's a whole different discipline, but yeah, it's really good area to focus on.
No, I love that.
It's interesting. We sometimes generalize your use of cloud is fairly simple. Are you doing this to save money? Now, Carm alluded to, maybe I can lay off people. But one of the things that we realize is they take and they use somebody else's computer, a public cloud computer, and they realize that all the stuff, Jason, that you worry about, they still have to worry about. Did you know you can still get ransomware in the cloud? That does not mean the cloud got hacked. It's just as vulnerable there as it is in your data center if you don't have the discipline. So the things that people are doing to run the organization efficiently, make sure the security in the organization still need to be done, even if you move somewhere else. And so, Carm alluded to a couple other things, like the infinite scale of cloud. Intuitively, if I'm going to start an AI project or I'm going to do something that I hope grows 1,000% a year, et cetera, there is no way other than public cloud to have that massive scale on demand. However, there's this other side of things that says, hey, I've got a bunch of stuff. I kind of know what I've got. It's not changing every day. My company's growing single digits or double digits, not 1,000%. And that's where we can give you really good analytics on this is what it is costing you now. Because honestly, nobody understands their cost of their data center. It's just this thing that is a cost. And if you're going to exchange that for something, what are you going to get from that? And we're actually pretty good at saying, this is what you got. This is what it would cost in a public cloud. This is what it cost in a hosted as a service cloud, et cetera. And I think that information is really beneficial to make the right decisions.
Agreed. Insight just went through it ourselves, and I was very impressed with the data that was presented. I think that's one of the key things. I mean, when you can put the financial models in front of folks and talk about this, that, or the other, that is a major game changer to people's understanding of, the cloud is abstract to a lot of people, especially when you start getting to the finance or operations aspects of the business. But then to put it into terms that they completely understand is very valuable. And I think the business leaders love to see that aspect as well. So
yeah,
very good stuff.
For sure. It's interesting because what I teach cloud computing as well, and every time I talk about the FinOps side of the cloud, like picking the right technology, my students roll their eyes and they're like, "We're engineers, we don't want to talk about it," but it's reality. It's
They have to care.
Right, architects have to make sure that you understand the financial obligations or pay for use that you're incorporating into your architecture, and I said opportunity, Kent. I didn't say lay people off. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
here's the big bang.
Yeah, go ahead.
In closing, I want you guys to close with some words of encouragement, since we focused on migrating to the cloud with each your own angle, right? What are those words of encouragement? What do folks need to do, look out for? How do they get started? Give us some words of encouragement for migrating to the cloud, or maybe migration's the wrong thing. Maybe right sizing the cloud, or whatever that term needs to be. We'll start with Ken.
It's a big question because everybody's cloud is a snowflake. Being in Minneapolis, where it just snowed, and so everybody's at a different place, and they're maybe X%, right? There are a lot of things that most organizations that don't think about this every day, like Carmen and I do, and they're trying to figure it out, that they didn't realize, oh my gosh, you mean I can do this at this cost? And so I think just having some people to sound it off. Now, of course, I don't want to pick on anybody, but Carmen, you're at AWS. Hiring an AWS consultant, you know what the answer is going to be. There are certain people that come from a certain walk of life that are going to help you do what they know. And I think one of the benefits we have is sitting back and saying, look, we want to hear what you're trying to do. We want to give you some advice because we work with all the public cloud providers. We work with all the infrastructure providers. We work with the hosting providers. We have so much breadth. Let us understand what you're doing. Let us see if there's anything that we can do to help to make what you're trying to do easier or faster. And if it makes no sense, it really didn't cost you anything. And so I think that's the best advice I could get is let's talk it through and see if that you see benefits in our experience there.
Nice.
And I guess I would say, kind of in line with what Kent was saying, but a little bit different is to look at this from a disciplined approach perspective. And to your point earlier, Jason, I think it's understand the business imperative. It's not just technology. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So if you can't fundamentally, I'll call it, justify the technical solution, then it's probably not the right solution to meet or address your business needs. And so I think one of the things that I like to talk to my customers about a lot is making sense. And so there's so much technology out there in the cloud or even on-prem, but it's more, how do we make sense out of this environment? And I think having the touchstone of the business imperative is really critical in order for us to succeed. So then, and really challenge companies like us, where we can justify or help you to justify the selection of technology because it makes sense to your business imperatives. And I think that that's probably the word of advice that I would give to organizations. It's like, you can accomplish your goals. There are many ways to do it. And, Kent and I being architects, and you're an architect too, but it's more just, how can we create those solutions? But we can give you the reasons why it makes sense for your organization instead of just hey, it's a shiny object, let's do it. So I think that's, really important. Challenge your partners, challenge your providers, because I think they can help you understand why you're making these decisions.
Love it. That was a bang. So, I mean, I love the hey, it's about the business. It's not about the technology, especially from a distinguished engineer. I mean, your job is to evangelize the brilliant tech that is available, but we've got to stay focused on the business. And the fact that you are is a great example and confidence, and that we want to deliver not just the technology, but the business solution. And I think, Kent, your point was perfect as well, is that everybody, I mean, literally is a snowflake. When I talk about security, it's the same vertical with the same technologies, typically even different because of the way the business operates. And so there's no easy answer to anything, but I think that's the other thing is, folks that can come in and take a look at the whole thing and then give you the appropriate advice and the steps, because again, it's not typically, oh, sign right here and we're done kind of thing. It's usually, nope, here's what's got to happen on our side, on your side, on their side, and the steps that have to go into play.
Yeah, so, and I think you guys both tied something that's really important. When we go into an organization, there are certain things they're invested in. I invested in these security things. I invested in these technologies. I've invested in these clouds. And so a lot of times I put up this wheel and it has Google, AWS, Azure, Cisco, I don't want to leave people out, but I put this wheel up and says, hey, we work with all of these. Which ones of these are important to you? And if it's not on the wheel, then maybe you should go talk to somebody else. But if it's 10 of those things, then maybe we can help because we work with all of them. And I think you deal with that in security in spades.
Yeah. No, well, thank you. And thanks to all of you. Again, it's been a fantastic year. You guys have kept us going. We appreciate the comments and the survey responses. And we thank our lovely production team in the background that makes us look great and sound great. If you guys want to know more about what we do here at Insight, please visit us at solutions.insight.com, and we'll see you next year. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys.